Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is an AE 9/11 Truth update, and as you can see right there in the headline, the Campbell family is urging a new inquest into the second submission to the Attorney General there in the UK. So what this means is that they sent a letter to the UK Attorney General, and what it does is it highlights that the first inquest into Geoff Campbell's death, it involved an insufficiency of inquiry, and this will justify grounds for a new inquest, which is what this is all about. To talk about this in more detail, we're joined by AE 9/11 Truth's Director of Strategy, Ted Walter, and of course, Matt Campbell, Jeff's brother, who is the driving force behind this entire effort. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Andy.
Here's Andy. Hi, Ted.
Hi, Matt.
So, Ted, we're going to start with you. Lay it out in quick context. Remind our supporters and any new people who come into this movement what this entire case is all about.
Sure, I'll try to be fairly brief because sometimes I can spend a long time talking about this important case. But Matt and his family submitted an application to the UK Attorney General last August, asking for her authority to then apply to the High Court for a new inquest into the death of his brother, Geoff Campbell, to be ordered. The first inquest into Geoff's death was conducted in 2013. It found that Geoff died in the North Tower and that the collapse of the North Tower was caused by the airplane impact. And the coroner did not consider really any evidence as to how and why the North Tower collapsed. And Matt, over the years, and his family have been studying the events carefully and realized that there was an abundance of evidence that contradicts that finding. And so they are trying to get a new inquest. And the law in the United Kingdom allows them to have that new inquest happen if there is evidence that was not considered at the first inquest that could possibly change the verdict at the first inquest. And there's other reasons as well. If there was an insufficiency of inquiry at the first inquest, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit more today. This claim of an insufficiency of inquiry was made in the Campbell's first the application that was submitted last August. If you read the transcript of the inquest, it's clear that the coroner doesn't really consider any evidence, is not presented with any evidence, and doesn't state any evidence as to how the North Tower collapsed. She simply reaches that conclusion and puts that in the inquisition form at the end of the inquest. And that case was already made. The news here is that the Campbell family was recently given a letter. Sorry, not a letter. It was recently provided with the report that was used at the inquest that has actually been exempt from disclosure for many years since that inquest in 2013. And so it was the first time that the family was allowed to see that report. And it's pretty much a superficial report, and just shows again that there was that they didn't look at how and why the North Tower collapsed. And so the Campbell family wanted to make it abundantly clear to the Attorney General who's reviewing their application that there's no evidence considered or put forth in this report. This is all the evidence that was considered at the first inquest. It's very scant, and it just strengthens their case that there was an insufficiency of inquiry. So that's what this is about right now.
Right, and there's 2 points that are laid out in the bulletin that we're going to be sending out about this. I'm going to ask Matt to comment, but Ted, please feel free to chime in as well. The first point is there's significant additional evidence not considered at the first inquest that has a reasonable possibility of overturning the original verdict. Matt, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's primarily evidence of controlled demolition. So that is already has been presented to the Attorney General with all the various statements and expert witness testimony and stuff like that. So this second submission doesn't really add anything to that. I mean, but we do specifically say that without prejudice to the abundance of evidence that we've already presented, new evidence, it's really the focus on this insufficiency of inquiry that's come about because we've actually managed to get our eyes on to look at this document that we couldn't get hold of. So in that respect, I guess it's new evidence that we didn't have in front of us when we were preparing the application.
That's right, and that's the work that our own government should have been doing, considering that this happened on our soil, but it affected people worldwide. And the second point here is the coroner at the first inquest did not conduct a sufficient inquiry because she concluded that the North Tower's destruction was due to the airplane impact without considering any evidence at all as to the cause.
Yeah, and this report. So all we had before was what was read out, and we have from the audio transcripts and the actual written transcripts of the inquest. But this is the only evidence that was put in front of her, and yeah, there's no causation at all. I mean, ultimately, if they're saying that the towers collapsed, which ultimately led to my brother's death, there was no evidence whatsoever considered in that first inquest in 2013. I mean, the actual report itself, I mean, it was prepared by a branch of the Met Police in the UK called SO15, and it's like a counter-terrorism command. And I mean, the report itself, it's not a large report, but I can see, because the differences between American English and British English, a lot of it is cut and paste. So they talk about airplanes, which is an American spelling. We call them aeroplanes, AERO planes, and that's clearly just been copied from whatever American report they've lifted that from. But yeah, I mean, really, it was, crikey, I didn't really expect there to be much in this report, but when you actually read it, you go, really, there was no evidence at all in that report that looked at the causation of my brother's death, which ultimately that's the key thing about inquests. They're fact-finding missions as to what caused someone's death.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a very interesting point that you just made there to pick up on, as the different spelling shows that they're just really just lifting it off of the American reports without any kind of independent inquiry. Ted, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we don't really have inquests per se in the US. And so I've been learning more about this process over the last couple of years. And these are supposed to be very rigorous fact-finding endeavors, where huge amounts of evidence are examined. It's like discussed openly and transparently in court by somebody who's an expert in weighing evidence and like understanding different types of evidence. And you have, experts come in and talk about, give testimony. None of that happened here in 2013 in the case of these 10 9/11 victims from the UK whose remains were repatriated. It was really this inquest was like a formality. And like, I don't think we want to cast any real aspersions on the coroner or any other people that were involved in putting this inquest together. But it wasn't a real inquest, I guess you could say, the true sense of it. And if it was the North Tower, the destruction of the North Tower, or the South Tower, in which most of these people perished, there should have been a careful study of how the towers came down, because that was the proximate cause of death for them, and there wasn't. And so, now we have the opportunity to go back and do a proper inquiry into what caused Geoff's death, and of course, thousands of others.
Yeah, and God bless you guys for leading the charge on this. Now, Matt, just overall, how do you feel about the process so far, and how all of this is going? How do you feel the momentum is?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it was kind of, apart from the initial communication backwards and forwards with the barrister and the Attorney General's office, it kind of went quiet. But I'd say, pretty much from the end of the year, as we've been in contact with the Coroner's Court as well as the Attorney General's office more, I do feel that momentum's building. I mean, we submitted this only yesterday, the second submission, and we've had a response back from the Attorney General, saying that it's going to be part of their ongoing consideration with, the requesting application that we've put forward. So I do feel it's got, eyes on it, and it is being taken seriously, and they are actively looking at the merits of what we're putting forward as to why there should be a new inquest. So I'm positive. Time frame, still don't know, but it's got to be this year. I can't see it dragging out longer. I'd be very.
Sorry. No, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it does seem to be some energy around this. I know when I was trying to help find a photographer for your mother for the billboard we were doing in New York City. The photographer had actually heard about this case, saw it on television, so it's something that's getting out there. Ted, we talk about this every time we have one of these updates, but please remind our audience of the following steps and the benchmarks that we can look forward to in following, this effort.
Right. So right now, the Attorney General's office is reviewing the Campbell's application, and of course, this latest submission, which is much less. And I think we all hope to hear, really within a couple of months, certainly by the year mark. It was submitted on August 26th of last year, so we really should be hearing by then. I think, to me, looking at the law that allows for this process to happen, it's hard to imagine more of a slam dunk in terms of having evidence that was not considered at the first inquest, in terms of having insufficiency of inquiry. Because I want to make it really clear that the Attorney General's job is not to analyze the evidence and determine, was it controlled demolition or was it a fire-induced collapse. Their only question is there a possibility of even a remote possibility, is it a reasonable possibility that this evidence could overturn the original verdict? So this evidence easily meets that threshold, and when we've shown very clearly that there was no real consideration of any evidence as to how the building collapsed. So the next step, once the Attorney General gets back to us and hopefully grants her authority, is that the Campbell family will then apply to the High Court for the actual order granting the new inquest. The Attorney General gives her authority, then the High Court sort of officially makes it happen. Historically, the High Court has always ruled in the same way that the Attorney General has gone. So if we get past this first hurdle with the Attorney General, I think we're very confident that that they will get past the second hurdle. And once we're past that, then it's the actual inquest, which could take weeks, perhaps months, but more likely weeks, where the evidence is presented to a coroner, and we have many expert witnesses ready to testify, several eyewitnesses ready to testify. And I hope that would be happening, say, within a year from now, that we will hear from the Attorney General within the next few months, that then there will be a High Court hearing at some point, maybe in the second half of this year, and that the inquest might be getting going by a year from now. So could be faster than that, maybe it could be slower. But what we do know, what we're confident of, is that it should happen. The way that the law is written, this completely meets the threshold for a new inquest to be granted. It's a slam dunk. And so I think we're all optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I'm optimistic, and we're going to be keeping everybody updated on the progress, as we always do. A lot of appreciation for you guys and what you're doing. It's hard to find the right words to express it, so I'll just say thank you, and keep the great work.
And I want to say thank you as well to Matt and your family for leading this charge. This wouldn't be possible, obviously, without you. This is largely for you, and I think you guys are incredibly brave and to be doing this. So thank you.
It's we're going to win. We're going to get that past that first hurdle. That's the critical one, and we're going to get that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we will be keeping you updated on this. If you're not signed up for our emails, then please do so. Go to ae911truth.org. That's where you can keep track of all of our great projects here and the progress we're making towards getting a new investigation for people like Geoff Campbell and all the victims that died on that terrible day 20 years ago. But for my part, this is Andy Steele saying, see you next time.